The tires of my black Lincoln Continental crunched against the gravel of Oakwood Lane as I pulled into the driveway, the sun dipping low over the manicured lawns of Fairfax, Virginia. It was April 10, 2025, and after a day of dissecting constitutional hair-splitting at the Supreme Court, I was itching for a bourbon and a quiet night. But quiet's a pipe dream when you live under the thumb of the Oakwood Homeowners Association and its self-appointed overlord Karen Blackwell. I'd barely shifted the car into park when I caught the chaos unfolding near the cul-de-sac. My brother Tommy, 50, blind since birth, and armed with a wit that could cut glass, staggered backward, his white cane slashing the air like a drunk fencer. Before I could blink, he toppled into the muddy drainage ditch beside our property, a plume of brown water exploding around him. His voice rang out, sharp and dripping with sarcasm. "Well, Karen, at least the ditch matches your personality." Karen Blackwell, 60 going on petty tyrant, loomed over the edge, hands planted on her hips, her bleach blonde bob trembling with indignation. She gripped her clipboard, her scepter of suburban doom, like it was carved from Mount Sinai. "You should have moved when I told you," she shrilled, her voice a dentist drill serenade. "That mailbox violates Rule 47B. No obstructing communal drainage aesthetics. I warned you, Thomas." I flung the car door open, my judicial robes flapping like a cape, and charged toward them. Tommy, sprawled in the sludge, fished his cane from the muck. "Oh, fantastic," he muttered, hearing my boots on the pavement. "Here comes Judge Dredd. Late as usual, Jim." "What the hell is this?" I demanded, glaring at Karen. She didn't flinch. Decades of harassing neighbors over unpruned shrubs and rogue garden gnomes had armored her in smugness. "Explain yourself. Now." She thrust her clipboard at me like it was a legal brief. "Your brother's hideous red mailbox blocks the drainage vista. I told him to move it, he refused, and I took action to protect property values. End of discussion, James." She smirked, daring me to argue. "Maybe if you weren't off playing big shot in DC, you'd know the rules." Playing big shot? I just spent 8 hours dismantling a Second Amendment case so tangled it'd make a Gordian knot blush. And now this HOA harpy had shoved my blind brother into a ditch over a mailbox? My pulse kicked up like a gavel on a bench. "Action?" I said, my voice dropping to that icy register I save for sloppy lawyers. "You assaulted a disabled man over a drainage vista? That's your story." Karen sniffed, adjusting her HOA-branded polo. He tripped. I barely touched him. And if Tommy can't handle a little nudge, maybe he shouldn't wander around unsupervised. Tommy wiped mud from his face and grinned. "A nudge? Karen, you've got to shove that'd flatten a linebacker. Next time, aim for the shallow end." "I'd hate to wreck your manicure digging me out." I almost laughed. Tommy's been the family joker since we were kids, blind or not. But seeing him soaked and shivering flipped a switch in me. Karen wasn't just a pest. She was a bully. And I don't let bullies win. Not in my courtroom, not on my street. Here's where it gets good, though. Karen thinks she's untouchable with her clipboard and her bylaws. She's strutting around like she's the queen of Fairfax. Think she's gonna get away with this? What do you reckon happens next? Will I let it slide or bring the hammer down? Drop your predictions in the comments below. I want to hear how you'd handle this if it were your brother in the ditch. "Karen," I said, stepping closer, "you're going to regret this. I mean it." She rolled her eyes, already pivoting on her sensible loafers. "Take it up with the HOA board, James. Meetings Tuesday. Bring your whining there." With a final huff, she marched off toward her Focolonial palace, clipboard swinging like a pendulum of doom. I watched her go, fists balled, as a plan started simmering in my skull. A plan as cold and precise as a Supreme Court ruling. I hauled Tommy out of the ditch, his cane dripping like a swamp rat's tail. "You okay?" I asked, brushing mud off his shoulder. "Peachy," he said, smirking, "though Karen's got a future in cage fighting." "What's your play, Mr. Supreme Justice?" "Play?" I glanced at Karen's retreating figure, then at the neighbors peeking from behind their blinds. Gossip spreading faster than a lawnmower sale on Memorial Day. "Oh, I'm just warming up. She thinks she's the law here? She's about to meet the real thing." Tommy chuckled. "Good. Make it sting, Jim. I want her sobbing into her rulebook by the end." I nodded, already plotting my next move. Karen had no clue who she'd just crossed. I faced down senators, CEOs, and legal scholars without breaking a sweat. A clipboard-waving HOA hag? She's a minnow in a shark tank. This was war, and I was bringing the gavel. 2 days after Karen Blackwell turned my blind brother Tommy into a ditch-diving spectacle, the Oakwood HOA summoned us to their version of a kangaroo court. The emergency meeting was set for Tuesday night in the community clubhouse. A squat, beige building that smelled like stale coffee and regret. I'd just driven back from D.C., still in my Supreme Court robes, the weight of a long day arguing over Fourth Amendment loopholes clinging to me like humidity. But this wasn't about search warrants or seizures, this was personal. The mini hook hit me as I parked. Karen didn't just shove Tommy. She's calling this meeting to fine him $500 for ditch defacement. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or throttle her. Tommy, cane tapping the pavement beside me, muttered, $500? What's next? Billing me for muddying her precious drainage vista. I smirked. Don't give her ideas. Inside, the clubhouse was a circus of folding chairs and whispered gossip. Karen presided at the front, gavel in hand, looking like a dictator who'd just annexed the cul-de-sac. Her HOA cronies, Mrs. Delaney with her pinched face and Frank, my nosy ex-cop neighbor, flanked her like a pair of dour bookends. The rest of the neighbors, a mix of retirees and harried dads, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. They knew better than to cross Karen, the clipboard queen. "Order!" Karen barked, banging her gavel so hard I half expected it to splinter. "We're here to address a violation of HOA Covenant Section 12. Residents must maintain decorum. Thomas Carver's actions on April 10th endangered our community's aesthetic integrity." Tommy snorted, loud enough to make Mrs. Delaney jump. "Endangered? The only thing in danger was my dignity when you yeeted me into that ditch." Karen's eyes narrowed. She held up a blurry photo, Tommy, mid-fall, looking like a muddy action figure. "Exhibit A," she declared. "This proves he defaced the drainage system. I propose a $500 fine, effective immediately." The room buzzed. Frank nodded sagely, like he'd just cracked a cold case, while Mrs. Delaney clutched her pearls. I stood, robes rustling, and cleared my throat. "Let's get one thing straight, Karen. Your evidence wouldn't hold up in traffic court, let alone mine. You shoved a disabled man, my brother, over a mailbox. That's not a violation. It's assault." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A guy in the back, Bob, I think, the one with the illegal above-ground pool, whispered, "Wait, isn't he some big judge?" Karen's smirk faltered for a split second, but she recovered, slamming her gavel again. "This isn't your fancy courtroom, James. This is Oakwood. My rules apply. Your rules." I leaned forward, voice dripping with the kind of calm that makes lawyers sweat. "You mean the ones you make up to harass people? What's Section 12 say about shoving residents, Karen? Or did you skip that page?" Tommy piped up, grinning. Guess shoving me was her idea of decorum. Maybe she'll fine herself next. $500 for bad hair. A few neighbors stifled laughs, but Karen's face turned the color of her overpriced azaleas. "Enough," she snapped. "You Carvers think you're above the law. Well, you're not. I've consulted our attorney, Rick Grayson. He says we can escalate this. Sue you for defamation if you keep slandering me." She crossed her arms, triumphant. "So back off, or you'll regret it." I raised an eyebrow. Rick Grayson? The sleazy ambulance chaser who advertised on late-night TV with a jingle about slip and falls? I'd seen better lawyering from a toddler with a crayon. "Rick's your ace, huh? Good luck with that. I eat guys like him for breakfast." The room went quiet. Karen glared, but I could see the gears turning behind her eyes. She wasn't used to pushback. Most folks here rolled over when she waived her bylaws, but I wasn't most folks. I've stared down senators who'd chew her up and spit her out before lunch. This was a game she didn't know she'd already lost. Tommy tapped his cane on the floor. Hey, Jim, you think she'll find me extra for laughing at her? I mean, it's hard not to. He turned toward the crowd. Anyone else think this is nuts? Or is it just me? A murmur ran through the room. Agreement, unease, maybe a little fear. Karen banged her gavel again. Meeting adjourned. Fine stands unless you appeal by Friday. Good luck, Carvers. She stormed out, clipboard under her arm, leaving a trail of tension thicker than the humidity outside. As we headed to the car, Tommy chuckled. She's got no idea who she's messing with, does she? Nope, I said, unlocking the Lincoln. But she's about to find out. Hard way. I slid behind the wheel, mind racing. Karen thought this was over, that her little HOA inquisition had won. She was wrong. I'd spent my career dismantling bad arguments and worse people. A $500 fine? A blurry photo? A threat from Rick Grayson? Child's play. I was already plotting, digging into the HOA charter, finding the cracks in her armor. She'd shoved Tommy, humiliated him, and now she wanted to bleed him dry for it. Not on my watch. This wasn't just about a ditch anymore. It was about justice, my kind, not hers. And I'd make damn sure she felt every inch of it. The Tuesday night HOA inquisition left a sour taste in my mouth, like cheap bourbon after a long day at the Supreme Court. By Wednesday evening, I was back home in Fairfax, Virginia, sprawled across my leather recliner with a laptop and a mission. Karen Blackwell thought she'd won with her $500 fine and her blurry ditch photo, but she just lit a fuse. Here's the mini hook that hit me as I scrolled through the HOA's digital archives. I uncovered a 20-year-old loophole that could turn the tables, but Karen's got a lawyer on speed dial. Tommy shuffled into the living room, cane tapping, and plopped onto the couch. You plotting yet, Jim? Or are you just gonna let Karen frame me for ditch vandalism? He smirked, tilting his head like he could see the gears grinding in my skull. Plotting, I said, eyes locked on a PDF of the Oakwood HOA charter from 2005. A relic of bureaucratic nonsense so dense it could double as a doorstop. This thing's a gold mine. Listen to this, Section 8, Clause C. Disputes involving physical altercations may be escalated to civil court, bypassing HOA jurisdiction. She shoved you, Tommy. That's my in. He laughed, sharp and loud. Oh, I like that. Karen's gonna flip when you drag her out of her little clubhouse kingdom. What's the plan? Sue her into next week. Better, I said, grinning. I'm suing her personally. Assault, emotional distress, the works. She'll be drowning in depositions before she can say, drainage vista. Tommy leaned back, folding his arms. Make it hurt, Jim. She's been on my case for months. Complaining about my guide dog barking, saying my trash cans were 2 inches off regulation. I'm done with her. I nodded, already imagining Karen's smug face crumpling in a courtroom. She'd built her empire on petty fines and petty fights, but she'd never faced a Carver with a law degree, let alone one who'd spent 20 years on the bench, shredding arguments sharper than hers. This wasn't just about the ditch anymore. It was about every time she'd bullied someone too scared to fight back. Time to balance the scales. I was halfway through drafting a complaint. ADA violations, punitive damages, the whole 9 yards, when the phone rang. Tommy groaned. $10 says it's her. I picked up, and sure enough, a nasal voice slithered through the line. James Carver? This is Rick Grayson, counsel for Karen Blackwell and the Oakwood HOA. I suggest you back off this little vendetta, or we'll countersue for harassment and defamation. Your brother's not as innocent as you think. I leaned back, smirking. Rick Grayson, bottom feeder extraordinaire, the kind of lawyer who'd sue a grandma for slipping on her own porch. I'd seen his ads on late-night TV, all slick hair and fake sincerity. Rick, I said, voice smooth as a blade, you're out of your depth. Tell Karen to enjoy her last few days of clipboard glory. She's about to meet real law. He sputtered, oh, it was glorious. You think you're tough because you're some DC hotshot? We've got evidence, witnesses, the works. Back off, or you'll regret it. Evidence. I laughed. That blurry photo? Good luck. And witnesses? Let me guess. Mrs. Delaney, who can barely see past her own nose. Bring it on, Rick. I've got a loophole and a grudge. You're toast. I hung up before he could reply, adrenaline pumping. Tommy clapped. That's my brother. You sound like you're about to argue a case before God himself. Close enough, I said, tapping the laptop. Karen thinks she's got the upper hand with Rick, but she's playing checkers. I'm playing chess, and I've got the board rigged. The charter loophole was airtight. Civil court was my turf, not hers. I could already picture her squirming under oath, trying to explain why she thought shoving a blind man was maintaining decorum. And Rick? He'd fold faster than a lawn chair in a hurricane. I've dismantled sharper lawyers in my sleep. But here's the kicker. Karen didn't know who I really was, not yet. To her, I was just Jim Carver, the grumpy guy next door who worked some vague job in D.C. She had no clue I'd spent decades on the Supreme Court, handing down rulings that made headlines and broke careers. That reveal was coming, and it had hit her like a freight train. Tommy stretched, cracking his knuckles. You think she'll cry when you drop this on her? I'd pay extra for that. She might, I said, saving the draft. But first she'll sweat. I'm filing this tomorrow. By Friday, she'll be served papers, right in front of her precious HOA minions. He grinned. Serve her good, Jim. Make it a show. Oh, it will be, I promised. The phone call from Rick had only stoked the fire. Karen wanted a fight? She'd get one. A legal cage match she couldn't win. I closed the laptop, mind racing with next steps. The loophole was my opening shot, but I was already thinking bigger. This wasn't just about Tommy's ditch dive anymore. It was about tearing down her whole petty empire, brick by sanctimonious brick. By Thursday evening, the air in Fairfax, Virginia, was thick with spring humidity and the faint whiff of Karen Blackwell's impending doom. I'd spent the day in D.C., filing my civil suit against her. Assault, emotional distress, ADA violations, the works, and now I was back home, sipping bourbon on the porch, savoring the calm before the storm. Tommy was inside, regaling his guide dog, Max, with tales of Karen's ditch-shoving antics. But then came the mini-hook that jolted me out of my reverie. A nosy neighbor catches me plotting revenge and threatens to snitch to Karen. Frank Russo, my next-door neighbor, 68, retired cop, and a man who loved his whiskey almost as much as his gossip, shuffled onto his own porch, a tumbler in hand. He'd always been a gruff sort, the kind of guy who'd eyeball your lawnmower technique like it was a crime scene. Tonight, though, he was too close for comfort, leaning against his railing as I muttered to myself about burying Karen in depositions. You talking about Blackwell? Frank called, his gravelly voice cutting through the dusk. Heard you're stirring the pot, Carver. What's the play? I froze, glass halfway to my lips. Had he heard everything? I'd been running through my strategy out loud. Depositions, subpoenas, maybe even dragging the HOA's finances into court. Frank's ex-cop ears were sharper than I'd given him credit for. Just venting, I said, forcing a casual shrug. Karen's got it coming, that's all. He took a slow sip, eyes narrowing. She's got the whole street scared, you know? Fined me $200 last year for a flagpole 2 feet too tall. Don't poke the bear, Jim. She'll make your life hell. I smirked. Too late for that. She shoved Tommy into a ditch. Hell's already here. I'm just redirecting it. Frank grunted, scratching his gray stubble. Your funeral, hotshot. But I'm warning you, she's got eyes everywhere. Don't say I didn't tell you. He shuffled back inside, leaving me with a prickle of unease. Was he just playing tough, or was he about to rat me out? Tommy tapped his way onto the porch, Max padding behind him. Was that Frank? Sounded like he's got to stick up his ass again. Yeah, I said, swirling my bourbon. Caught me scheming, told me to back off Karen. You think he'd snitch? Tommy laughed. Frank? He'd sell his grandma for a good story. Bet he's dialing her right now, spilling the beans over a nightcap. I glanced across the street, and there it was. Frank's silhouette in his kitchen window, phone to his ear, gesturing like he was directing traffic. Beyond him, Karen's McMansion glowed, her blinds twitching. Paranoia kicked in hard. Had I underestimated the HOA's spy network? Frank wasn't just a busybody, he might be her damn informant. Son of a bitch, I muttered, setting the glass down. If he's ratting me out, this just got messier. Tommy tilted his head. Messier how? You've got the lawsuit locked, right? Locked, I said. But if Karen knows I'm coming, she'll lawyer up fast. Rick Grayson's already sniffing around. I need to move quicker, hit her before she builds a defense. Before I could strategize further, the mail slot clattered. Tommy raised an eyebrow as I grabbed the envelope. Certified mail, HOA letterhead. I tore it open and my blood boiled. Karen had upped the ante. The fine was now $1,000, citing emotional distress from Tommy's reckless ditch behavior. A handwritten note scrawled at the bottom read, "Back off, Carvers, or it gets worse. KB, she's unhinged," I said, crumpling the paper. Emotional distress? She's the one who shoved you. Tommy grinned. Guess my mud bath traumatized her delicate soul. What's next, Jim? You gonna let her play dirty? Hell no, I said, pacing. This is war now. She's not just doubling down. She's taunting me. Frank must have tipped her off already. I'll bury her so deep in legal hell she'll need a snorkel to breathe. I stormed inside, mind racing. The loophole from the HOA charter was still my ace. Civil court trumped her little fiefdom, but Karen was mobilizing. Frank's betrayal stung, though it wasn't a shock. He'd always been the type to play both sides, sipping whiskey with me one day, kissing Karen's ring the next. Fine, let him snitch. It'd only make the payback sweeter. Tommy followed, settling on the couch. You think Frank's getting a cut of that grand? Maybe she's bribing him with free lawn clippings. I snorted. Wouldn't put it past her. But he's small fry. Karen's the target. Tomorrow she gets served right in front of her HOA lackeys. I want her humiliated. Good, Tommy said. Make it loud. I'd pay to hear her squeal. I poured another bourbon, plotting. The suit was filed, the loophole was solid, and Rick Grayson was a lightweight. But Frank's meddling and Karen's escalation meant I had to tighten the screws. Maybe dig into her past fines, her HOA budget. Find something dirty to twist the knife. She thought she could intimidate me? I faced down legal titans and walked away grinning. Karen Blackwell was about to learn what happens when you shove a Carver and get caught in the crosshairs of a Supreme Court justice with a grudge. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear in Fairfax, Virginia, but inside the district courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation and the faint scent of Karen Blackwell's desperation. I'd served her the civil suit papers the day before, right in front of her HOA minions as they sipped coffee in the clubhouse. Her face had gone from smug to scarlet faster than a stoplight, and now here we were, me, Tommy, and a packed gallery of nosy neighbors, facing off against the clipboard queen herself. But here's the mini hook that kicked things up a notch. I dragged Karen to court, but she's got a surprise witness who could ruin everything. The courtroom was a far cry from my Supreme Court chambers. No marble pillars or velvet drapes, just scuffed linoleum and a judge's bench that looked like it had seen better days. Judge Hargrove, a grizzled vet with a no-nonsense glare, presided. I'd argued before him years ago when he was a fresh magistrate. He'd always had a soft spot for sharp lawyering. Today I was counting on it. Karen sat at the defendant's table, flanked by Rick Grayson, her sleazy lawyer who looked like he'd slept in his off-the-rack suit. She wore a crisp blazer, clutching her clipboard like a security blanket, while Rick shuffled papers, muttering about frivolous lawsuits. Tommy sat beside me, cane propped against the table, whispering, "She's sweating already, Jim. I can smell it." I grinned. Good. Let's make her drip. Hargrove banged his gavel. Carver versus Blackwell. Assault and emotional distress. Plaintiff, proceed. I stood, robes swapped for a tailored suit. I wasn't here as a justice today, just a pissed-off brother with a law degree. Your Honor, on April 10th, Karen Blackwell assaulted my brother, Thomas Carver, a blind man, by shoving him into a drainage ditch over a mailbox dispute. We're seeking damages, $50,000 plus punitive. for her reckless violation of his rights under the ADA and basic decency. The gallery murmured. Bob from the illegal pool leaned forward, whispering to Frank, who'd shown up despite his snitching. Karen's eyes darted, but she kept her chin high. Rick jumped up, all bluster. Objection. This is an HOA matter, not a civil one. Jurisdiction's off. I shot back. Overruled by your own charter, Rick. Section 8, Clause C, physical altercations go to civil court. You're out of your sandbox. Hargrove nodded, motioning me to continue. Rick slumped, and I laid out the case. Tommy's fall, Karen's clipboard tyranny, the $1,000 fine she'd slapped on him as retaliation. I even played the disability card hard. ADA violations carry weight, and Hargrove's frown deepened with every word. Karen took the stand next, her voice a mix of indignation and syrup. I barely touched him, Your Honor. He tripped. I was protecting our community's aesthetic standards, Rule 47B. The Carvers are troublemakers, always have been. Tommy snorted. Troublemakers? You're the one who turned me into a mud pie. Hargrove's lips twitched, a rare crack in his stone face. I crossed her, calm but cutting. So, Ms. Blackwell, you admit you made contact with Tommy? A nudge, she snapped. He was in my way. A nudge that sent a blind man into a ditch, I said. Over a mailbox you didn't like. That's your version of protection? She squirmed, clipboard creaking in her grip. It's about property values. Property values don't trump human rights. I fired back. You assaulted him, then fined him to cover it up. That's not leadership. It's thuggery. The gallery buzzed. Hargrove leaned forward, intrigued, but then Rick stood, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Your Honor, we call a witness. Mrs. Evelyn Delaney. My stomach dropped. Mrs. Delaney, 78, HOA loyalist and Karen's lapdog, hobbled to the stand, peering through Coke bottle glasses. Rick preened. Mrs. Delaney, tell us what you saw on April 10th. She clutched her purse, voice quavery. I saw Thomas waving his cane menacingly at Karen. She had no choice but to push him away. He provoked her. The room erupted, whispers, gasps, a few snickers. Tommy muttered. Menacingly? I was trying not to fall on my face. I shot to my feet. Your Honor, permission to cross? Granted, Hargrove said, eyes sharp. I approached, keeping my tone dry. Mrs. Delaney, you're saying a blind man menaced Ms. Blackwell with his cane? Yes, she said, nodding primly. He swung it at her. So a cane, his mobility aid, is a weapon now? I asked. How far were you when you saw this? 10 feet? 20? She hesitated. Maybe 50? 50 feet, I repeated, loud enough for the back row. Through those glasses? You could have mistaken Tommy for Bigfoot. Did you see the shove? Or just the aftermath? I saw enough, she stammered. He provoked her, right? I said, turning to Hargrove. A blind man provoked a shove into a ditch, as witnessed by a half-blind woman 50 feet away. Sounds airtight to me. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Hargrove smirked, but Karen's smugness didn't fade. She had something else up her sleeve. I could feel it. Rick whispered to her, and she nodded, eyes glinting. They weren't done. Hargrove called a recess. Outside, Tommy nudged me. You shredded her, Jim. But that witness, what's Karen cooking now? No clue, I said, jaw tight. But she's scrambling. We've got her on the ropes. Next round, we finish it. I paced the hall, mind racing. Mrs. Delaney was a Hail Mary, but Karen's confidence gnawed at me. She had a card left to play, and I'd damn well be ready for it. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The recess ended with a bang of Judge Hargrove's gavel, and the Fairfax courtroom buzzed like a beehive poked with a stick. I just dismantled Mrs. Delaney's menacing cane nonsense, leaving Karen Blackwell squirming on the defendant's side. But her smug grin told me she wasn't out of tricks. Tommy nudged me as we settled back in, whispering, She's got that look, Jim, like she's about to pull a rabbit out of her clipboard. He wasn't wrong. And here's the mini hook that lit the fuse. Karen's countersuit backfires when my true identity leaks, and the HOA's about to implode. Rick Grayson stood, smoothing his rumpled tie, and launched into his counterattack. Your Honor, we're filing a countersuit. James Carver's abused his judicial influence to intimidate my client. An HOA president just trying to uphold community standards. This isn't justice. It's a power play. The gallery gasped. I leaned back, smirking. Judicial influence? I hadn't even flashed my Supreme Court credentials. Yet, nice try, Rick, I said, loud enough for the room. I'm here as a private citizen. You've got no evidence, just hot air. Rick grinned, holding up a folder. Oh, we've got plenty. Exhibit B, phone records showing Carver called the courthouse yesterday, pulling strings. He's not just some lawyer. He's a Supreme Court justice, throwing his weight around to bully Karen. The room exploded. Neighbors whispered, heads swiveling. Bob from the illegal pool choked on his water. Frank, the snitch, muttered, holy hell, I knew he was big time. Tommy laughed outright. Oops, Rick, you just screwed your own case. Hargrove banged his gavel, but the damage was done. Rick, in his rush to paint me as a villain, had let the cat out of the bag. My identity, the ace I'd kept up my sleeve, was now public. Karen's face went from smug to slack-jawed, her clipboard slipping in her hands. Supreme Court Justice? She stammered, like she just swallowed a lemon. I stood, voice calm but cutting. That's right, Karen. Justice James Carver. And you picked the wrong family to mess with. I turned to Hargrove. Your Honor, since counsel's so eager to bring my job into this, let's clarify. I've acted within my rights as a citizen. Ms. Blackwell assaulted my brother, then tried to bury him in fines. If anyone's abusing power, it's her. Hargrove's eyes twinkled. He'd clerked for me decades ago and knew my style. Noted Justice Carver. Mr. Grayson, you've opened this door. Proceed at your peril. Rick, realizing his blunder, floundered. Well, Your Honor, the point is, he's intimidating us. Karen's been harassed by his legal threats. Harassed? I shot back. You mean like fining a blind man $1,000 for emotional distress after shoving him into a ditch? That's your defense. I pulled out the HOA charter. Section 8, Clause C, Civil Court trumps your bylaws. And here's a bonus. I'm petitioning the Supreme Court to review HOA overreach nationwide. Guess who's Exhibit A, Karen? The gallery erupted again. Cheers, gasps, a few, oh damn, s from the back. Karen's eyes widened, her blazer suddenly looking 2 sizes too tight. Rick whispered frantically, but she shoved him aside, leaping to her feet. This is outrageous. I've done nothing but protect property values. You can't do this. Watch me, I said, leaning forward. You've terrorized this neighborhood for years. Fines, threats, petty rules. Shoving Tommy was your last mistake. The Supreme Court loves a good test case, and you're it. Hargrove raised an eyebrow. Justice Carver, you're serious about escalating this? Dead serious, I said. HOAs like hers hide behind bylaws to dodge accountability. I'll dismantle that shield. Starting here. Karen slumped, her empire crumbling in real time. Outside, neighbors were already on X, posting like wildfire. HOA lady messed with a SCOTUS guy? Karen's toast. The hashtag ditch justice trended within minutes. I checked my phone during a sidebar. Tommy grinned. You're famous, Jim. Think they'll make a movie? With my luck, it'll be a comedy, I muttered. But inside, I was electric. This was the climax I'd been building toward. Karen's countersuit had backfired spectacularly, and my identity was the wrecking ball. Hargrove, smirking, announced, I'm recusing myself. Conflict of interest, given my history with Justice Carver. Case'll be reassigned. He leaned closer. Good luck, Jim. Give him hell. As we broke, HOA members swarmed the hall, muttering about audits and dissolving the board. Karen stormed out, Rick trailing like a kicked puppy. Tommy clapped me on the shoulder. You just blew her world apart. What's next? Next, I said, watching her disappear. The Supreme Court. She's not just losing this case. She's losing everything. This was it, the peak of the war. Karen's tyranny was unraveling, and I'd lit the match. She'd underestimated me, and now the whole country would see her fall. 6 months after Karen Blackwell's courtroom meltdown, the dust settled in Fairfax, Virginia, and the view from my porch was sweeter than ever. The Supreme Court had taken my petition. Carver versus Blackwell became the case that broke the HOA camel's back. In a 7-2 ruling, we'd gutted their unchecked power, declaring that no bylaw could override civil law or dodge accountability for physical harm. Karen's little empire didn't just crumble, it was dynamited into oblivion, and I got to light the fuse. The fallout was glorious. The district court, reassigned after Hargrove's recusal, hit Karen with $50,000 in damages for assaulting Tommy. $25,000 compensatory, $25,000 punitive, plus court costs that left Rick Grayson whining about unfair bias. Her HOA presidency? Stripped faster than a rusted mailbox in a storm. The Oakwood HOA itself dissolved when neighbors, emboldened by the ruling, voted it out. Turns out nobody liked paying fines for breathing wrong. Karen's reign was over, and I'd made damn sure she felt every second of it. I leaned back in my recliner, sipping bourbon, as Tommy stepped onto the porch with Max, his guide dog. He'd swapped his old mailbox for a bright red monstrosity, double the size, just to twist the knife. "You hear from Karen lately?" he asked, settling into a chair with a grin. "Nope," I said, smirking. "Last I heard, she's holed up in that McMansion, muttering about activist judges, probably drafting a manifesto on proper ditch etiquette." Tommy laughed. "Good, let her stew. I'm still picturing her face when you dropped the Supreme Court bomb. Worth every muddy minute in that ditch." The memory was golden. Karen's jaw hitting the floor, Rick flailing like a fish on a hook, the gallery erupting as #DitchJustice went viral. X was still buzzing with it. HOA tyrant owned by SCOTUS bro. Karen's ditch karma equals 100. I'd even caught Bob from the illegal pool posting memes. A stick figure of Karen tumbling into a ditch, captioned "Justice served, Carver style." The neighborhood had changed, too. Without the HOA, lawns grew a little wilder, flags flew a little taller. Frank even put up that 2-foot-2 tall pole again, daring anyone to complain. Speaking of Frank, he'd slunk over a week after the trial, bottle of whiskey in hand, mumbling an apology. "Didn't mean to snitch, Jim," he'd said, eyes on his boots. Karen had me spooked. I'd taken the bottle, poured him a glass, and shrugged. "Water under the bridge, Frank. Or mud in the ditch, take your pick." He'd laughed, relieved, and we'd toasted to freedom. Tommy, passing by, had quipped, "Next time, shove her into the ditch. Fair's fair." Now, as the sun dipped low over Fairfax, I raised my glass. "To liberty and ditches," I said. Tommy clinked his beer against it. "And to brothers who bring the hammer down." The ending was as satisfying as a gavel's bang. Karen slunk away, her clipboard tyranny a memory, while Tommy and I stood tall, victors in a war she'd never seen coming. I turned her petty shove into a national reckoning, and damn, it felt good. Revenge? Sure. Justice? Absolutely. A little fun along the way? You bet. But here's the best part. This isn't just our story. It's yours, too, if you've ever dealt with a Karen of your own. Maybe it's an HOA hag, a nosy neighbor, or some petty tyrant with a rulebook. We took her down, and it was a hell of a ride. Loved seeing Karen get what she deserved? Like this. Share it with your buddies. Drop your own HOA horror stories in the comments. I want to hear them. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit that bell. Don't miss the next tale of justice, Carver style. This fight's over, but there's always another ditch waiting. I leaned back, bourbon warming my chest, and watched the twilight settle over a freer Oakwood Lane. Karen had underestimated me, thought I was just some cranky neighbor with a grudge. She didn't know I'd spent decades on the Supreme Court, sharpening a blade she'd never see coming. Now she knew, and so did every HOA dictator coast to coast. Mess with a carver and you're not just digging a ditch, you're digging your own grave. Tommy tapped his cane on the floor. Think she'll ever come back? Nah, I said, grinning. She's done. But if she does, I've got a spare gavel with her name on it. He laughed, and we sat there, basking in the quiet victory. The mailbox gleamed red in the fading light. A middle finger to the past, a promise of a future where the carvers called the shots. Justice served, HOA dissolved, and one hell of a story to tell. Case closed.